Hi, I'm Ernie,
And I'm Ben.
and this is Budget Nerds.
What was all in your mind?
You are not alone.
No, you are not. And today, Ben, we are getting really nerdy. We're going to be talking about zero-based budgeting. What is it?
Yeah.
How does it work in YNAB? What are people's fears around it? So why don't you start us off here, Ben? What is zero-based budgeting?
This is kind of a subject that people have been talking about lately. I think a lot. It's a particular kind of budgeting that really YNAB does, and other budgeting methods do too. Where really, I think it's encapsulated by the idea of Rule 1: give every dollar a job, right? Because in some budgeting methods, instead of giving every single dollar a purpose, you kind of set spending limits. You know what I mean? Like you might say, I want to spend no more than X amount on restaurants and X amount on groceries and X amount on shopping. And you might set up like maybe 3 or 4 or 5 categories that way, where you just set a spending limit, and then the rest of your money is just kind of for whatever, right?
Sure.
But with zero, so that's not zero-based budgeting. That's where I would call that like spending limit budgeting. Zero-based budgeting is where all of that extra money also needs a purpose. You need to save it, or you need to just define exactly what it's for, and that's what we do with YNAB, really.
And what's your personal experience with zero-based budgeting? I mean, is that something that you've been doing pre-YNAB, or did you discover it with YNAB?
I was doing it pre-YNAB. Yeah, that was really the way I was taught to budget. And it's kind of funny because I was using Mint before YNAB, and I think I kind of broke Mint a little bit. I've talked about this before because I wanted to do zero-based budgeting. And I think, at least at the time, this was back in 2013, I think, so it might have changed. It was more set up for doing spending limits, and it would give you like helpful notifications saying, hey, you're getting close to your spending limit on restaurants, you might want to slow down, that kind of a thing. And that was more what it was after. But I wanted to give every dollar a purpose, and so I think I kind of did some tricks in the software to kind of make it work. And I think I kind of broke it because I started getting rounding errors and all these problems. So
Sure.
It was kind of funny. But yeah, then when I found YNAB, I saw it was zero-based. I think that's one of the things I really liked, that it was all about, rule 1 really resonated with me: give every dollar a job. I was like, yeah, that's how you budget. But YNAB takes it even a step further, because we do what I would call envelope budgeting, which I almost think of it as like, okay, so like there's budgeting as this big topic, and then there's a type of budgeting called zero-based budgeting, right, where you give every dollar a job and not just set spending limits. And then under that, you have envelope budgeting, where not only are you doing zero-based budgeting, but you're also only budgeting money that you have right now. And that's kind of a further limit, a further boundary in how you budget money.
Yeah, looking back on my budgeting experience, I've always done zero-based, and that started with an Excel spreadsheet. But what I was doing there was, income minus expenses equals 0. And I was mostly budgeting with dollars that I don't have. So at the beginning of every month, I would set all of those spending limits essentially, and then track my spending, and then just hope and pray that by the end of the month that it actually does come out to 0 and that I don't overspend. But it never worked until I discovered YNAB and actually started budgeting only the dollars that I have.
Yeah,
or I should say budgeting the dollars that I actually have.
Yeah, not the future money that you expect. Yeah, and so I think that you can do what we call forecasting, where you put your expected income at the top for the whole month, and you budget all of that. So long as you give all of that expected income a job, you're doing zero-based budgeting. But you're doing what we call forecasting, which is budgeting money you don't have, right? But so YNAB adds that extra layer on top that I think is really the secret sauce that really brings a lot of clarity to your budget, because you don't have all this monopoly money in there.
Right. what's the phrase that we always say around here? Scarcity brings clarity.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I never had any clarity when I was budgeting those monopoly dollars, right? But when I had a finite amount of money that was actually in my bank and I had to figure out what is that going to do until I get money again, well, then my priorities became crystal clear. All of a sudden, eating out or that shirt at Target aren't as important, and it's preparing for the upcoming water bill, rent, stuff like that.
Yeah. Everything kind of, when you kind of limit yourself to only what you have, you kind of, you run into that scarcity and you're like, ooh, I don't have enough for everything I want. And at first that feels kind of bad,
It's horrible.
Like, I don't like this, but then you realize it allows you, again, it's another like little brain hack. It just allows you to realize what's most important to you. And it's not like you can't get that stuff, but you might have to say, not right now, not until I get paid again, Yep. Am I going to go for that kind of stuff? So yeah, so YNAB is a type of zero-based budgeting where we're giving every dollar a job, right? So that's the zero-based budgeting part, and then the envelope budgeting part is what we do as well, where you're also only budgeting money you have right now. Another thing that I think is really powerful with zero-based budgeting, as opposed to just setting general spending limits, is you really see the trade-offs you're making when you are committed to giving every single dollar a purpose. Because if you kind of just have, okay, I take care of my bills and then I take care of, or I set spending limits on just a few things, and then the rest of the money is just kind of for whatever, right? You lose a lot of clarity, because you don't really see what you're giving up if you're spending on something, because you haven't defined ahead of time how you're going to spend. You know what I mean?
Right. So I'm just thinking back to when I was budgeting with Excel and I was forecasting all those amounts. Right away we would overspend in eating out for the month.
Yeah.
And we didn't make any trade-offs. We didn't then go back and adjust the budget. Oh, we got to spend less here. It was more of just let's hope that we
messed up. Right?
Yeah, or we just hope we spend less in groceries or some other category, or we try really hard to spend less throughout the rest of the month.
Right. Yeah, I think that rule 3, which is roll with the punches, which is move money in your budget, change your budget when your priorities change or when you overspend. It doesn't really work unless you have rule 1, give every dollar a job on top of it. You know what I mean? Because if you just kind of have this amorphous pile of money, you can't really make decisions like, I'm going to give up a little bit of my vacation money in order to go out to eat with a friend who just came into town, right? You can see if you've given every dollar a purpose, you see, okay, I'm giving this up to get this other thing.
Yep.
Right. But if you don't give every dollar a purpose, it's hard to see what you're giving up when you make those decisions, And
the end result of all that, giving every dollar a purpose, rolling with the punches, weighing those actual trade-offs, is that you spend less than what you make. And so at the end of the month, you actually have money left over, and you can use that to get ahead. And that is just the sheer power of the YNAB method. That's what the spreadsheet never gave me. When I got to YNAB, I was actually spending less than what I made. Yeah,
I think that's huge. And it just brings so much clarity, really. I mean, just like I even say, people, there's a lot of people, even when you're using YNAB, who just want to have kind of a general spending category,
Sure.
And you might put, that's fine, I think, to a certain limit. But if you put like half your income in there, you put a lot of money in there, it starts to get a little bit fuzzy. And so I'm always trying to encourage people in workshops and elsewhere to get really specific with how they're budgeting their money, to really do zero-based budgeting and give every dollar a really clear purpose. And if you just do that exercise, I think you find that the clarity you get from it is just so powerful.
Absolutely. And also, I think worth pointing out too, is that by giving every dollar a job, we're not saying you need to spend that that money.
No, yeah, I think that's one of the biggest fears, because a lot of people like to find, oh, zero-based budgeting is income minus expenses equals zero, right? And you hear that and you think, so you want me to spend all of my money every month? Like, that seems like a bad idea, right? But that's not what zero-based budgeting means. It just means you're giving it a purpose. And when you budget money, it doesn't mean you're getting ready to spend it, right?
Yep.
Like an example is true expenses, really. All the non-monthly expenses that you're saving up for. You're going to spend that eventually when those things come up, but you're not spending it every single month, right? Or maybe there's some money that you're never going to spend, or hopefully, you'll never have to spend it, like an emergency fund, right? That is a very specific purpose for a job. It's this money is for really big things that I couldn't see coming, right? Really things that are going to just totally overwhelm me, right? And hopefully, especially if you're saving for other non-monthly expenses, you might not ever have to touch that, or maybe every once in a while, right? So it doesn't mean that you're going to spend all your money every month by giving it a job. It just means you're giving it a purpose every month.
And it might be worth mentioning too, we want you to budget for something fun too. This isn't just, the bills and the expenses, but there's that component of, doing something that you just get to do whatever with the money.
I think people feel like, especially when they're new to budgeting, if I say budget all your dollars, they're like, well, that means I'm not going to have any fun, because they think budgeting means punishing yourself, or
restrictive,
means being all responsible and adulty, and and so they can't imagine that one of the purposes of your money might be to do something crazy fun, right? And you should spend, if that thing is important to you, you should spend as much as possible on that, So yeah, if you're worried about, oh, won't I need some money for fun? Well, the answer is budget some money for fun. Right?
Yeah, this is something I always mention in the budgeting with a partner, because usually the situation is, one person gets super interested in budgeting, the other one not so much.
Right.
Like, no, I don't want you to have a budget. That means we're not gonna be able to spend anything. But it's those personal spending categories. Or, oh, okay, I still have this money that can spend guilt-free on whatever I want. Whew, okay, maybe budgeting isn't that bad.
And it's funny because when my wife and I, when we started increasing that personal spending category, like for when we first started, it was like, I think it was like $10 a month or something. It was like way too little. I mean, if you want to do that, that's fine. If you have like some really big goals and you're going for it, or maybe your income is smaller and you really need to focus, right? But for us, that was pretty tight. It was like you could get a cheeseburger, and that's about it.
Woo, what a month. That was fun.
Right. But it's funny, I think because the YNAB method is like so ingrained in us, when we started increasing that as our income increased and as our goals changed, we started actually creating separate category groups. Like my wife, she was the first to do this. She created a separate category group called Katie Budgets, and she had like a coffee category there, and a few other things that she was saving for. And she took the money out of her Katie savings Katie spending category and put it into this category groups, because it almost felt like it was too much to just not have just be general spending, you know what I mean? So she wanted to like define it even more. And I started doing the same thing. So it's kind of funny. I think the more you budget and the more you really trust your budget and work on it, you'll start to feel this sense of, hey, this category is a little too amorphous, a little bit too wishy-washy, and I need to take that out and define it a little more. Because like really, if you think about zero-based budgeting, it's almost like a spectrum, right? Because you could have all your money really closely defined. You could have like a toothbrush category, like a toothpaste category, you could be like really specific, or you could just have like a general spending category. And then, so it's almost like you're not really doing zero-based budgeting once you get that far. So yeah, like you look through your categories and just kind of see, is there anything that's too broad and has too much money in it? And maybe I'm not really giving those dollars a very clear purpose and I need to get more specific there. I think another thing that people struggle with when we start talking about giving every dollar a job is, what if something happens and the budget that I set up doesn't work, right? Because they feel like the budget's going to be super rigid because there's no wiggle room. You know what I mean? So like, how would we answer that? I think
try again next month. That's what I always told myself. That was pretty
you messed up and try again next month, right? No,
that's not what I'm saying now. But yeah, I mean, with the Excel spreadsheet, we've briefly talked about this, but yeah, it didn't work. And so I just, okay, well, this month was a loss. Let's try again next month. Or just, I'm going to take a break and we'll pick it up in the fall, or we'll pick it up at this new season of life. But with rule 3, roll with the punches, doesn't matter what's broken because you can adjust and adapt. And you can, stay in the budgeting game. And it's crazy, but it works. Yeah. No matter what curveball gets thrown your way, the budget with rule 3 can adapt and adjust. And it feels really good. Like, I mean, it's an endorphin rush to be able to move that money around and be like, nope, I've got this. And
yeah, you handle it instead of like feeling guilty. Instead of just like feeling guilty, you can actually change your budget and deal with the situation in the moment. So yeah, I think that piece is what's missing from other zero-based budgeting methods, where, because I think sometimes the tone of zero-based budgeting is, kind of wagging your finger and saying you set the budget and you can't change it ever, but then you run into the situation where things are so rigid, and because you haven't, because you don't have this like amorphous whatever money, everything has a purpose, right? You don't have the ability to adapt as much. But if you give yourself permission to move money between categories and actually change your budget, you now have a more flexible budget that's not going to break when unexpected things happen.
Yep. So. And I mean, it's never fun having to pull money from categories, right? Like, I don't think anyone says, oh, I'm so glad I'm spending on this car repair, but
right.
It's like you deal with it in the moment and then you move on a minute later. It's not this constant thing just weighing on your mind day in and day out about where am I going to pull this money from? Or I broke the budget again.
Yeah, you don't have to feel like a constant failure. Oh, I screwed it up again this month. I guess I'll try again next month. And oh, I screwed it up again this month. Right? It's oh, there was a problem and I creatively found a solution, and I can feel good about that and move on.
Yeah.
So it can be really powerful there. So that's zero-based budgeting in a nutshell, and kind of our take on it at YNAB.
And obviously, we're very big fans of it here at YNAB. Zero-based budgeting the YNAB way. I guess I'd be curious to hear from the community as what's their experience with zero-based pre-YNAB, and what has changed since using YNAB.
Yeah, have you done other budgeting methods where you weren't giving every dollar a job? How did that go for you? Were you just kind of setting spending limits and going from there? We'd love to hear what your experience has been, and if you're using YNAB now, how that's changed. We'd love to hear about it.
Cool. Happy budgeting, folks.
Yeah, happy budgeting. We'll see y'all later.